Hello, and welcome to the FI Entrepreneur, Financial Planning for the Risk Taker. This podcast will show you how to achieve FI through entrepreneurial pursuits by developing a well-calibrated and thought-out plan for risk management so that you can maximize the rewards.
Hosted by certified financial planner, enrolled agent, and serial entrepreneur Ben Martinek, this is the FI Entrepreneur, Financial Planning for the Risk Taker.
The information presented in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. None of the content is presented as investment advice. Consult your financial professional before acting on any of the information presented in this show. Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me. This is Ben Martinek again with the FI Entrepreneur, Financial Planning for the Risk Taker. I am joined today by a fabulous guest, Brant Cooper, author of the New York Times bestselling novel or book, The Lean Entrepreneur. So he's a perfect guest for us in our show. I'm looking forward to talking to Brant and getting to know some of his background and details on entrepreneurship and some of the insights he's learned in 25 years of working in the entrepreneur space. But before I steal too much of your thunder, Brant, would you mind introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about your background?
Yep, sure. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I guess the way I describe my background is that when I came out of college, I didn't know what an entrepreneur was and startups were not hip. And there was a little inkling of stuff going on in Silicon Valley. You heard about Intel maybe. And if you were smart, you invested. But I was always sort of a square peg in a round hole. And in other words, I kind of knew I didn't want to just do what other people told me to do all day long. And my early managers sort of tossed me around like a hot potato because of that, I think. And it wasn't until I joined my first startup in Silicon Valley in the late 90s, really sort of at the heyday of the dot-com boom, that I understood that there were these organizations where you were sort of expected to figure it out. You were sort of expected to go and drive impact and not do what you're told, but go figure out what the right answer is. And so that was a pretty empowering lesson. And so I never figured to be the idea guy or whatever, the guy with the eureka moment that comes up with the next great idea. So I even rarely use the term entrepreneur for myself, to be honest. It's really more about the entrepreneurial spirit and what does that mean? And so it was going through the ups and downs and the successes and failures in a variety of startups that really taught me some of the lessons then that I put into the book, The Lean Entrepreneur, as well as my latest book, Disruption Proof.
Yeah, awesome. And I'd love to jump into those books here in a moment, but I am kind of curious, Brant, in your experience in entrepreneurship, can you just share a little more about, did you jump into a startup? Did you join a team in the early phases and get the bug for entrepreneurship? What kind of lit the fire for you?
Yeah, that was it. We had a CEO. It was, one of those things, you go and join a startup and for the first time in your career, there's somebody younger than you that's running the company. And so your bosses are younger than you, but it was really awesome. We really thought we were going to change the world with the internet back in the day.
Sure.
And we did to a certain extent, but that was what the CEO inspired us with, is let's go make the world a better place. And to me, that was the purpose of capitalism and entrepreneurialism is you reap the benefits, i.e. money and lifestyle, from creating value in the world. And so that's really what my focus has been on. And so that's what caught the bug. And, I tried a couple companies myself, and I think those were the big failures, but mostly I was joining early teams and helping them grow and succeed and learning all along the way. And then eventually I started my own business and have never looked back. But it was really that early experience of being in an environment where, hey, go take care of your job, go learn, go drive impact.
Yeah, awesome. So would you say then the spirit of entrepreneurship or what really attracted to you was just this notion of making the world a better place, but inspiration? It sounds like you're really driven by just what entrepreneurs can do for the world. And maybe to put a negative contrast to this, the concerns of, I don't want to speak of people who are non-entrepreneurs too much in a negative light, but are happy to stay in the current setup and not really change or innovate or pivot, right? Or you're just willing to stay status quo.
I really wonder if people are really like that, or they just don't know that there are the choices. And also in the grand history of thing, I think we're going to look back on the industrial age and it's going to be this tiny blip in human society where we drove people's creativity and intelligence out of them in order for them to do what they are told to do. And that was really kind of the 20th century. And I think that era is over.
Sure.
We need workers to be empowered to solve problems. We hire smart, creative people to solve problems. And not to bring too topical, but you can even just look at what is going on with Twitter and whatnot. And the key people are the ones that are leaving the company. Elon Musk is not the key person. It's the people that drive value by creating products and understanding customers and Sure, there was lots of problems, but the problems are going to be solved by the smart, creative people that you have working for you. You can't do everything yourself. And so I think we're going into an era where people will learn that, yes, I'm going to go ahead and have a regular job, but I'm going to drive impact because that's what I want to do. And I'm creative and I'm smart and I've been empowered to do that.
Awesome. It sounds to me almost like your vision or what you would like to see for the workforce moving forward into the 21st century is that almost everyone gets the bug of entrepreneurship, or that we've kind of lost the bug and we need to reignite it within ourselves so that everyone from the C-level down to the rank and file, if you will, is inspired with this fire to innovate, to improve, to change, and to take on a co-ownership within the organization.
I think that's exactly right. And again, I think that we look at things like the big quit and even the silent quit and all of these other names they throw on this, and people are burned out. And it's because of sort of not having that entrepreneurial spirit, not only in themselves, but also in their businesses, that they're not allowed to exercise that spirit, even if they have it. And so people need to sort of be inspired, and they need to be taught some new skills, and leadership and management needs new skills in order to enable that and empower that. And I think that we start getting onto a virtual cycle instead of a virtuous cycle, instead of a vicious cycle, which I kind of think we're getting to the end of here now. Optimistically, I say.
Sure. Well, I feel like this is a good segue, Brant, into the lean entrepreneur. You wrote a book about this, and it was geared towards this methodology of not necessarily being a visionary, but I think just picking up and starting where you're at. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what you were hoping to convey in your message in that book?
So the entrepreneurial spirit is what I was trying to show people in the lean entrepreneur, that everybody can be entrepreneurial. And it doesn't mean that you're always in learning mode or exploration mode, but you have to find a balance between execution, doing the things that we know must be done, and taking time for the learning. And I like to say these days that exploration makes execution more efficient. So if there's any uncertainty in what you're trying to execute on, it's better to pause and try to figure that out before you execute with all of that uncertainty. And so there's a number of specific skills that we teach in the Lean Entrepreneur, which is understanding your customers deeply. And that doesn't mean asking them what they want and doing what they say, but what's sort of driving them? What are their passions? What are their aspirations? What are their needs? And so that's what we're then bringing our creativity to, is what their needs are that they want addressed, not just feature requirements. And so it teaches also the idea of rapid experimentation. So busting through your assumptions by running experiments. And these are really pretty rigorous behavioral-based experiments to try to figure out if people will do what you think you need them to do, right? So any new product or service, we're asking customers to change their behavior. They're doing something now, we want them to do something differently. And so you can actually validate or invalidate your assumptions by running experiments to try to figure out if you're going to be able to get them to change that behavior in any significant way. And then we're also teaching how to use the right metrics, data, insights in order to help you make decisions. And so those decisions, based upon evidence, help you cut through your own biases and all of those really painful moments where your customers are telling you your baby's ugly and you're like, no, it's not. And in the end, you can look at the data and see if it's true or not. And those are really tough moments. And believe me, I teach this stuff and I still fall into those traps.
Oh, do you now? Yeah, I'm sure you do. We're all human, aren't we? At the skin level, for sure. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm curious, Brant. So I've got a couple businesses. I've got some success with me under where I stand. And we work as we see people coming through to us through the podcast. There seems to be two dreams in play. Either the dream of running your own business, kind of breaking from you, if you will, from the corporate world and starting out on your own. Could be a startup, could be a professional service, could just be something you're running from your home. There's just any number of reasons why people might be a little hesitant in making that transition. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts on what advice or encouragement you would give for somebody in that first dream. But then also just to give you an awareness on the second one, we see it with folks who are, this is more so myself. They've got their business going, everything's running, but sometimes they dream whether or not they should have dreamed. It might be one fun way to say it. I mean,
oh man, I've been there.
Entrepreneurship can be tough, right?
Believe me, I've been there. For small business owners in particular, I think the last 2 or 3 years have been really rough on us. So to the first one, there's no better time, right?
Yeah.
The digital revolution means that you can start side hustles and see if they grow into something bigger, if that's what you want, or you go ahead and just keep them small and make some revenue on the side. And so I really think that that's an opportunity for everybody and young people. I think that they kind of dream that way sort of naturally. I think it probably goes back to the creativity and intelligence that people are born with, and they want to go and express that. And so the digital world allows us to do that. I've got a whole website, startupbluebook.com, that's dedicated to getting people to go off and give that a try. And it's super low risk. And people are thinking about, it's really bureaucratic and you got to do all this filing with the government. And it's actually not true. It's really easy to get started.
Right.
And so then it's also pretty darn easy if you're willing to get out of your comfort zone to take the first steps, which are to just identify who you think your early customers are, the people that would be, if you were successful, they'd be lining outside your store, like at Best Buy, because the new iPhone's coming out. Who are those people that would be like, wow, I really want this? And you just go talk to them. Go talk to 5, go talk to 10, try to get to 20 and try to find 20 of this pattern. You're looking for a pattern, like people that you would establish a community with is one way to think about it. But people that share the same need would actually refer to each other based upon being able to address that need. And so it's not, demographics might play a role, but it's really make it need-based as opposed to demographic-based. If you go and looked at the lines out the Best Buy store, it didn't matter what race or gender or income or whatever. It was just these people that were like, nutty about something. And so just that first step, just finding 5, 10, 15, 20 people that are going like, wow, yeah, if you could really address this need, that would be incredible. And you're trying to get that emotion from them, right? Then that's going to give you confidence in taking the next step. And you can continue to take steps like that and then start running experiments where it doesn't cost you hardly any money, if any at all, to start giving you the confidence that you actually have an idea that's valid in the market as opposed to just between your ears.
Yeah, well, we like to call that proof of concept, right?
Yeah.
Before you get too invested in this, literally, right?
Right. But people take proof of concept and they go like, well, I have to build the product first.
Yeah.
And so, the concept, that's an important part of that word, right? The concept is not the product itself. Don't go build the product and then prove the concept. Prove the concept based upon finding out whether there's actually human beings in the world that have the need that you think you're addressing.
Right. The mistake that I've seen, I would be curious to see what mistakes you've had. I was certainly guilty of this when I first started out, of kind of building the business as a reflection of you and what you wanted to be. And earlier in this conversation, you had made mention of this entrepreneurial spirit about making the world a better place. And in some ways, kind of we want to insert ourselves into the world and make a statement of ourselves. But what we necessarily find fascinating isn't what everyone else is going to find fascinating and may not be as compelled by. So this insistence on we need to find a product or a service that gets people excited and jazzed and settle on that or focus in on that first just seems worthwhile. Have you seen any other mistakes, the startup phase with entrepreneurs, where maybe it's a reversal of opinion as time goes along?
I think that there's something that you're alluding to there that I think is really interesting, is that in the end, it's very difficult to predict the size of the market.
Yeah.
And the tricky part about being an entrepreneur is, maybe you have these grand visions, and then if the market actually isn't going to get there, then what do you do? You can change what your ambition is, but maybe it's just simply not what you want to do. And so you just shut it down, even if it was profitable, right? So there's this idea of aligning your values and being really super honest with yourself about what you need to achieve in order to continue this. So I guess this is kind of getting to your second dream, right? I think that there's a lot of techie startup people that are like, I'm going to go become the next unicorn. They go and raise a bunch of money, and simply the market wasn't ever going to be big enough to justify the amount of money that they raised. And they lose their company because of that. They lose their company. The investors will take the assets of the company. Whereas maybe that founder would have been satisfied with building a company that, had 100 employees and was making a bunch of money and had a good customer base. It just wasn't going to be the unicorn.
Yeah.
It's pretty tough to understand that about yourself early on, but it's those types of alignment between really what it is that you really need in your life. Sort of realistically, the number of unicorns is obviously pretty low, or they wouldn't call them unicorns.
Exactly.
And so maybe you should make choices based on how you're going to fund your company based upon what those true values are. And so those are tough things to know first time out. I usually kind of go through a couple crashes and then you start figuring that out about yourself. But hopefully you crash small, not big.
As a follow-up to that, I'm kind of curious to see in your experience, Brant, if you would have like a recommended protocol for going through. We often encourage on the show that people just start small, especially if they haven't been an entrepreneur before and they don't have necessarily a big business background. We don't discourage. We think that's still great for you to pursue entrepreneur pursuits.
Yeah, definitely.
But start small and, it's a learning process. There's a lot more to learn here from what you probably think's going on. And so what's the best way to migrate into the space, do you think?
I think you're spot on. And so like the first advice I was giving, literally the first step is finding 5, 10, 15 people to talk to. There was an entrepreneur I was helping once in Madison, Wisconsin, and he had this app where you would choose an article of clothing and then you'd hit shuffle and the app would like complete the wardrobe. And so he'd already built the whole thing. And I asked him, well, how can I help you? And he's all like, I need 1,000 customers. I go, okay.
Oh my gosh.
How many do you have? And he go, I don't have any. And I'm all like, you don't need 1,000, you need one.
Yeah, right.
So I think you're exactly right. You got to start small. And of course, that's what keeps it inexpensive.
Yeah.
And it's great to dream big. I'm all for dreaming big, but I think with so many products and so much competition for people's mind share, it's just not like it was back in the 50s or 60s. If you come out with a microwave oven, you're only a couple of companies that are doing it. And all advertising and everything was sort of the megaphone from the top of the mountain. And so there wasn't that much noise. And if you just think about today,
Yeah.
there's 1,000 different microwaves. And not only that, but there's like, how do you even get people's attention? It's really hard. And so I think that the era of like the big launch is over.
Mm-hmm.
You're always launching. It's incremental launch. Products are never done anyway. The moment you have a digital product, there's no such thing as done. It's just the next version that's coming. And so I think that the key is to start small. Even the small business, the laundromat puts their first dollar on the wall, right?
Right.
Because that was like a momentous occasion. So you're literally trying to get your first dollar because somebody has just proven to you that you're providing them enough value that they're going to give you something.
Yeah.
And so that's the first step. And the steps become bigger after that, but you don't want to confuse the size of the journey with the size of the first few steps you take. And so it's starting small and incrementally growing based upon wins. You're just looking for wins.
Right. Let's get some revenue in the door and just see if we can get some more revenue in the door and what kind of changes or adjustments can we do to keep that revenue coming. So let's talk a little bit about the second dream then before we pivot into, I like to talk about your next book, Brant, but the second dream, we have folks who they've launched, they've got some success, they've got some years of revenue under the book, but now start to be, their days are filling up. I'm in the early stages of starting your own business. You're just looking for something to do sometime. It's like, you got more of an abundant time on your hands.
Right.
As time goes along, it's like, where'd my days go? I don't know if I accomplished anything today, right? I'd like to see what your thoughts are on this latter stage where people are starting to be like, what do I need to do to get this business back under control?
Yeah. So I think that, again, the digital age offers a lot of solutions there. I think that people often, actually, entrepreneurs look at tools too early, but all of the tools, all the software and all of these things, that's what's supposed to be freeing you of time. And so if you do it too early, you actually might be implementing things that are not serving their benefit. So the philosophy I have is that you learn how to do it in person, you learn it analog, and then your job as a founder is to pass off all of the things that you've learned, all of the things that are now in execution mode to either lower paid, low skilled people that have the ability to execute the job. So not so low paid or low skilled that they can't do the job. That's worthless.
Sure.
But you're trying to pass that off onto other people who are going to follow the process that you figured out. Hopefully they're actually creative and intelligent, again, to go back to that they can continuously improve the process without breaking it. Or you're looking for ways to automate what you've learned. And so I like to think about marketing as the part of sales that can be automated. Those two things should be taking time away from you because you as founder need to be in exploration mode, not execution mode. Execution belongs to your team or software. Exploration belongs to you. What is the obstacle for the next level of growth or the next thing that I need to accomplish? So you're back in learning mode in order to create the next part of the blueprint, and you're going to pass that off again. And so just that philosophy of figuring it out, passing it off, figuring it out, passing it off. And again, passing it off could be human or it can be automated. Part of that also, though, requires you to, these are the tough things, I think, for a lot of founders. Number one is you have to have faith in your team. You have to empower them to do what's right in order to keep that execution phase working. And they're checking in with you. You're not checking in with them. They're giving you regular reports. This is the status. Here's the metrics that we're accomplishing, what we're supposed to be accomplishing. Here are the obstacles you could help us overcome. Those 3 or 4 things, they're reporting back to you on a regular basis. That's their job. So that you have the comfort to go, okay, that is an execution mode. We're executing. Now I need to figure out what's the next thing to uncover. That takes a lot of trust. It's tough to build, and it's not really native, I think, for us to like switch it off and give it to somebody else, but it's required. And the second part of it, and this is maybe even harder, that team will not be able to do the job as well as you can. But your customer maybe doesn't care.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah. You have to think about like the value that we're creating is a threshold, not a continuum. And so you as founder likely did this threshold of, yep, my customers love me. And then you did a whole lot more on top of it. And it was just because of your passion and your expertise and that you grew up with it and you invented it and it was yours. You can't help but provide that. Okay, your team, they have to get you to the threshold that your customers still love you, but they're not going to be able to do all of the stuff beyond that. And it doesn't matter. So if you try to hold your team accountable to your own level of ability, you will not grow. You will not be able to keep your employees. You will not want to keep them. You'll be dissatisfied and you just won't be able to grow because you'll hop back into the execution and you're no longer doing the exploration looking for what are the obstacles to growth.
The execution side is so enticing, I must say, as an entrepreneur, I'm certainly guilty. I mean, everything you just said there was like, wow, you're preaching to the choir. Like, I need this to be heard. But in your experience, how have you like defined or confirmed that exploration versus execution? Like, because it's so easy with important tasks and urgent tasks, especially urgent tasks, to keep falling back and rationalizing.
Yeah, it's hard.
As one person has told it, play Office. I get to play Office. Like the thing that you should be doing, you keep being like, oh, I got to go back and play Office. Like, no, you need to like explore as you're suggesting. Like, how do you commit or make sure that you do that? You do what you're supposed to do.
It's a good question. I actually hate all of that Office stuff.
Okay.
So I can't pass it off quickly enough. So maybe that actually, I'm just lucky that way. So I don't know. I think that you got to practice a lot of self-awareness. I mean, you have to like spend some time with your thoughts about why it is. Is there something that's you're sort of afraid of in the exploration side of things? Is it that you're going to demonstrate that you don't know something? Is it that you're afraid to make a mistake? What is your personal obstacle for doing the exploration stuff? That's usually the fun stuff, like to me. But I think also it kind of gets back to the values thing. Maybe you don't need to grow. So maybe what you would rather do is spend more time with your family or something. Everybody's an individual, but to me, there's something going on there if you're sort of not able to go off and do that part. It's hard, but I guess I like that challenge. Whereas the managing the execution stuff is just like, ugh.
You're all too happy to pass that along.
I'm all too happy to pass it along, as my poor operations people know.
No, I'm looking to get stuff off my plate all the time too. So
yeah.
For those who haven't heard it already, or if this first time listening, or, entrepreneurship is hard. And I tell you what, the biggest thing that has to grow and change and develop for your business to grow and change and develop is you. I mean, it's the person standing in the mirror when you're looking at it.
Totally.
I mean, it's one thing that I love about it. It's a constant call to be better, to improve and change. That's where this entrepreneurial spirit that we were mentioning earlier in the call, I think could just be revolutionized and should be what everyone's pursuing, because hopefully we're getting that aspirationally across all aspects of our life.
I totally agree with you. All aspects of our life. It's really getting back to admitting when we don't know things and then going into learning mode. Our society for so long now has been like, no, I must know everything. And I get promoted because I know everything, or because I'm really good at pretending I know everything. And if we can just go like, actually, it's okay for you not to know. Let's go learn.
Yeah. Let's go learn. Let's go explore. I mean, that is fun. Like, I haven't met anybody in the work that we do who doesn't want to explore. Like, it comes up, it's a question we ask pretty much everyone we work with. Fundamentally, I've seen it every time. I mean, with dozens, hundreds of people now, everyone wants to go explore. It's just certainly a deep down human trait that we carry.
Absolutely. And what's funny to me is I can even think about like networking events. So back in the 90s and the 2000s, networking events were just the worst things in the world. I mean, it's just passing business cards and people are looking over your shoulder, looking if there's somebody better to be talking to, And I find like a lot of meetups now are completely the opposite. It's sort of like, well, how can I help you? And let's think about this together and let's whiteboard something. There's this collaboration. It's sort of the idea the rising tide lifts all boats. And that stuff is so much more fun than those old networking events. And you can do it in jeans and a t-shirt instead of a three-piece suit. So, I mean, things have gotten better in that regard.
Yeah, we're going in the right direction there, without question.
Yeah.
I don't need all that stodgy, stuffy stuff. That doesn't help anybody.
No, it does not help anybody. The last thing you want is somebody selling you.
Yeah, right. Well, Brant, I'd like to talk a little bit about the newest book that you released called Disruption Proof. You've got to focus on the 5 E's. And a few of these really stand out. We've been touching upon exploration. What else would you like to give insight to? I mean, Disruption Proof is really about uncertainty and dealing with that and just being able to change with the times and not to be unable to change. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, when you go out into this, the way it was when you first started isn't going to be the way it is when you finish for sure. And you got to be willing to roll with the punches. Is that what you feel the Disruption Proof is about?
Yeah, it's really rolling with the punches is a good way to describe it, and more system-wide than just as a business owner, like more economics-wise. The punches are not going to stop coming. So I think that I wrote this book during the pandemic, and it was really sort of where it dawned on me that things like the pandemic and supply chain issues and ransomware attacks or some equivalent of ransomware attacks, all of these things have always happened around the world. But in the world that we live in today, the globally interconnected speed of information, the speed of misinformation is so fast that all of these disruptions that have always occurred now ripple across the economy all the time, and they ripple across our businesses. And this is the new normal. There's no going back to the way it was before. This is the digital world. And so we have to understand that. And then we actually have to look at managing and structuring our work differently in the face of this constant change and constant disruptions. And so a lot of the things that we were talking about from the lean entrepreneur in this exploration mode is exactly the behavior that you need. I don't really go a whole lot into the behavior again in Disruption Proof because that's what was in the lean entrepreneur. And so in a lot of ways, this is more about how do you manage and structure the work as leaders in order to empower people to be in that exploration type of behavior. I do throw a couple more in there, though. One is this idea of equilibrium, of finding a balance. And that's a balance between the execution and the exploration work, but it's also allowing human beings to have balance in their life because that means they come to work way better, highly productive. And again, I think we found that out during the pandemic. Productivity didn't go down. People don't want to come back to the office because they figured out they can do all of their work in 50% of the time. And what that allows them to do is take care of family, be closer to their family, take care of the other aspects of their human life. And so then when they're coming to work, they're coming highly engaged and more productive. And so I think that we as leaders need to enable and help people find the right balance so that we've got a healthy, productive workforce. And then the second part I added to all of the exploration is the idea of ethics. And we can't just have values on our website. We need to build the ethics into our behavior. And this idea of assembling teams and empowering teams to go and do the execution work, but also continuous improvement. Maybe you get big enough that you've got employees working with you in the exploration side. In the digital world, it's just really easy to forget who's on the other side of whatever it is that we're producing. And we have to keep our customers safe. Our job is to create value for our customers. So it's our responsibility, whether you're a startup or a small business or you're big tech, we have to keep our human beings, our customers safe. And that should be built into the work that we're doing.
For sure. I mean, we're all still human. As we've alluded to a few times here, we're not doing ourselves any favors if we forget that our customers are human beings too. And when it comes to ethics, you have that classic golden rule of just do unto others as you want others to do unto you. I mean, I think just keeping that top of mind as you're conducting any business you can't go wrong. Do you feel like that summarizes pretty well business ethics in your mind, or would you have anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, I think that that's great. You can't go wrong with that. And I think that there's just people that fall into the trap of thinking that, well, capitalism works best when it's sort of no holds barred. And it's just not true. I mean, all of our businesses, all of the markets that we participate in at some level would not exist without regulations and laws. And we follow laws in the non-business world. And if you don't have laws for business, what do you have? You have the underworld. You have the black markets, right?
Right. Yeah, mafia.
You've got people busting kneecaps, right?
Right.
So, I mean, this sort of whole anti-regulation stuff is a little bit silly. And by the way, big companies love regulations. They lobby for regulations because they're getting regulations that put up barriers to entry in their markets, right?
There you go. Yeah.
That's what they're really doing. But what's funny to me is that one of the most famous articles that kind of came from this very laissez-faire, almost libertarian side was Milton Friedman back in the 70s. And even in his sort of iconic screed on business and ethics, he says companies need to adhere to laws and social norms.
Right.
And so it's like, well, everybody just sort of ignored that phrase, that paragraph that he wrote there, I'm so pro-capitalist, but I'm pro-capitalism in creating value for human beings. And that raises the standard of living and it makes for a more virtuous world. And so that's what we, as even smaller time entrepreneurs, it's our responsibility to play our role in that.
No, I'm familiar. I've actually teach a business ethics course, amongst other things, and have a background.
Awesome.
A master's in philosophy or a master's in ethics. So I had Milton Friedman's work.
Well, I'm talking about preaching to the choir. You should be telling me.
Well, everything you said there was music to my ears. It was great. Yeah. Milton Friedman's work, the only socially responsible thing a business should do is make money, be profitable. But I feel it's just a little naive, all due respect to Milton Friedman, right? I think it takes a little more than just profitability to keep us all in check and mind our better manners.
Well, I agree with you, but I also think that he wrote the paragraph that they must adhere to laws and social norms. So
right.
It's why has everybody else ignored the paragraph?
It's a good point. There you go. Right. I mean, it was like he didn't acknowledge the need for these other customs to keep us in check as well.
Yeah. And I put in the book, in the intro, I believe, is quotes from Hewlett Packard, who preceded Friedman, but just really understood. And I mean, that was just an iconic company for so long, and yet was built on top of these foundations that were ethical. And were any of them longing for any more money or power? I mean, I don't think so. And so it's just really weird that people turned this around to being like, oh no, it's just about money. I mean, it's just so not true. And of course, there's a huge percentage, I'm guessing, of your listeners that already know this, because entrepreneurs themselves usually do not start businesses in order to make money. Money is the outcome of providing value to humans.
Your expression that looking to make the world a better place is, I think, the fundamental driving concern that I've seen amongst our clientele and the listeners of the podcast. Like,
yes,
they want to make the world a better place. And you don't do that without originating from an ethical springboard. That's the inspiration and what's moving it. So I mean, obviously we want to make money. I mean, the business isn't going to stay around very long if it's not profitable.
Right.
So,
exactly.
But that's not the only concern that's driving us by any means.
Yeah. And I'm not one that believes that Uber should be curing homelessness, but it's a big stretch from Uber should be curing homelessness and Uber shouldn't be doing evil, right? So, I mean, it's like, there's a huge gap in between, and Uber should be, and I'm not picking on Uber, but
sure,
I kind of do in the book, but they should be accomplishing their mission ethically.
Gotcha. Well, as we wind things down, Brant, I know that you've got a website called Moves the Needle that does a lot of consulting and work associated with startups, folks who are in the early phases of entrepreneurship or who are looking to improve systems and operations and ultimately be a better leader, be a better company. Our podcast, the FI Entrepreneur, is all about obtaining financial independence through entrepreneurship. It's kind of a driving focus is a belief that entrepreneurship is actually one of the best ways as part of a financial plan to obtain the life you want and get the best returns that you would hope to get. And so I'm just curious if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about this website and the consulting services you offer through Moves the Needle.
Yep, sure. So Moves the Needle is, to be honest, is focused on trying to bring an entrepreneurial spirit back to like really large companies. And the goal there is that, again, if we can get companies to figure that sort of stuff out, then the people that are going to go and work there are going to be able to live sort of impactful lives and be happier than the rut they're in now. So that's mostly what Moves the Needle is focused on. I have another company, Market by Numbers, that runs the startupbluebook.com, which is really for the entrepreneurs and really tries to teach people how to launch those first gigs and then grow them if they want and grow them as big as they want. So I'll continue to be adding courses there. I also do a lot of the help I do for startups, to be honest, is usually free mentoring and advice. I have to limit that or else that would be everything I get.
Right.
But I do encourage your listeners to reach out if they have a question or if they want to talk about what we talked about here today. Brant at brantcooper.com. I answer all messages and I'm Brant Cooper on all social media, including LinkedIn, and I respond. So I do encourage startup and people and entrepreneurs to reach out, and I'm happy to do what I can.
Well, that's awesome, Brant. I really have enjoyed chatting with you and connecting here. I mean, it's just so much fun to connect with another entrepreneur and kind of hear and share some stories about what it's like. And thankfully, the rest of our audience was able to listen in on that too. But yeah, thanks for all the work you've done. Thanks for the message. Thanks for the good work you're doing in the world. And we'll have to have you back another time. This has just been fabulous.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was great talking to you, and have me back anytime you want.
Sounds good. We will. Thanks for listening. I hope you've had as much fun as we did. If you'd like to learn more about any of the subjects we spoke about, please visit our website for show notes, links, and more. Hit like, subscribe, or whatever button you've got in front of you to show some love. Remember, the information presented in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only.
Remember what Teddy Roosevelt said about the person who strives greatly. If he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Until next time, keep striving.
Thanks again, and be well.